to Wealth, Wisdom, and Whatever, our iMoney podcast on just about anything we feel like. Today, we are talking about the impending implementation of e-Invoicing. So with us, we have Chai Fong Ying, a tax expert from YYC Group with 8 years experience as a chartered accountant. Hi, Fong Ying.
Hi, Farhan.
I think just to set the scene, e-Invoicing is this requirement by the government that all companies must issue their invoices in a digital format starting from next year, yes? Could you explain a bit more?
Government want us to implement the e-invoice according to the phases. But of course, the first phase will be on 1st of August 2024 this year. So this is for those who have annual sales value of more than 100 millions in year 2022. So they have to start to implement e-invoice on 1st of August 2024. So this is the first phase. Then the second phase will be on first day of the next year. That means 1st of January 2025. This is the implementation date for those taxpayer who has more than 25 millions and up to 100 million of annual sales value in year 2022. And lastly, the third phase is on 1st of July 2025. So this is the big days for whole Malaysia. That means this is a date where all the taxpayers who have 25 millions and below, they have to implement the e-invoice. No matter they are roadside hawker or they are freelancer, they all need to implement e-invoice.
So when we say e-invoice, it means normally we just issue like this PDF file or something, but now it has to go through their system.
Yeah, so a lot of my clients will ask me this question. Hey Fong Ying, I've actually implemented e-invoice few years back. Why do I need to implement now again? Because I already generate the invoice in PDF file and I send to my client in a soft copy via email. So that's already an e-invoice. Why do I need to implement now again? So normally I'll ask them a question. Do you think that this is the e-invoice that RB wants?
See.
So no, that's not the case. The e-invoice that RB wants actually, like you said, is a digital representation and they are going to issue the invoice in a digital format in the XML and JSON file and then transmit it to the IRB via the e-invoice system.
So this is like, for the layman who doesn't understand, this is kind of like using the current MyTax site for paying your income tax, but instead of that, you're using it to generate your invoice for your customers and all. So when you say everyone has to issue an invoice, and you say like the roadside makcik with the nasi lemak also has to issue an invoice.
Yep.
So how will she do that?
How will she do that?
Yeah. If I buy nasi lemak or kuih, I don't even get a receipt, right?
Yeah, currently you don't get a receipt.
So now I must get something.
You must get something in case you need the invoice to claim from the company. So if you want the invoice, right, how does the machi at the roadside worker or the fish market, right, how they issue invoice for you? According to the recent hot news from RB, they announced that they will provide the My Invoice for mobile app and they will launch it somewhere in October this year. So machi all the nasi lemak hawker roadside worker, right, they will implement the e-invoice only at the next year, July.
We are also saying that this applies to everyone, yeah? Including freelancers. Because right now I know some of them don't even bother with an invoice, right? They just, I do work for you, I trust you to pay me.
I've always been asking by my workshop client as well. So they ask, hey, what if I'm a freelancer, but I'm not registered with SSM? I'm just like purely accept the side job, side income. I don't even register with SSM. So do I need to implement e-invoice? I said, yes, as long as you are running business, as long as you are undertaking commercial activity, you need to implement e-invoice.
Okay. There's also, like, say, groups like clubs that collect fees. Do it also need e-invoice?
You mean the association, all those clubs all receive the fees? Even you receive fees, receive donation or receive sponsorship, need to issue invoice.
So everything.
Yes.
IRB wants to know everything you're doing.
Yeah. They want you to prove your income.
I see. Okay. Are there any exemptions to this?
Yeah, of course there are exemptions for certain group and certain entity. such as our Yang Dipertuan Agong, our kings, and also our former Yang Dipertuan Agong, they are exempted as well. So the government body, state government, and all those government authority, they are exempted. And more importantly, the individual who are not conducting any business also exempted as well. That means for those people who purely receive salary, purely receive rental income, purely receive dividend income, they don't have to issue any invoice.
So I assume if I'm just selling things second-hand also, I don't need to use this, right?
Yeah, you don't need to issue. Let's say you are purely salary earner, you are not running any business, you are not sole proprietor, you are not partnership as well. Then if you sell your cars, let's say, to another company, you don't need to issue any invoice. They are the one who need to issue self-built e-invoice.
Okay, so I already have my own e-invoicing system. How can I connect it to the My Invoice from LHDN? Is there API? Is there any sort of access that I need?
Yeah, actually there are two ways to handle e-invoice. The first option, of course, is My Invoice portal. Now this My Invoice portal is actually developed and is hosted by Inland Revenue Board. This portal is accessible for all taxpayer at no cost. That means free, and no integration needed, no upfront cost needed. So it's free for all taxpayer. But another option is that if you have your own ERP system, you have your own accounting software, you have your own POS system. Let's say you want to use the API application programming interface to connect with My Invoice system that is hosted by the IRB. You can use API method directly transmit the invoice from your own system to IRB system. This is more convenient way for big companies. I think the sandbox environment was open in April this year, but for real environment, that means it's a production environment that is launched by IRB, was in May this year. That means last month. But the production environments only open for those pilot company. That means those company who join the pilot project.
So how does one issue an e-invoice?
For those taxpayer who are using My Invoice portal to issue invoice, and for those who are using API to issue invoice, the procedure for both is almost similar. So currently when we issue invoice, we directly send to our clients, right? That's very simple. But moving forward, when the invoice is implemented, that's no longer the case. So that means the seller, when they sell something, they need to first issue the e-invoice to the IRB for validation. A lot of my clients will ask, Fong Ying, how long does the IRB system takes to validate my invoice? So actually, according to the guideline, it says within 2 seconds. So it's quite fast lah. Once you press a button, then the validated invoice will come back already. So once the seller, they receive the validated invoice, right, they need to check 3 things. First thing is they need to check the unique identifier number that is assigned by Inland Revenue Board. And second thing is they need to check the date and time for validation. And the third thing is the validation link that is embedded in the QR code. So step 3 is once the invoice is validated, right, the IRB at the same time will send a notification to both seller and the buyer. Once the supplier receives the validated invoice, they must share the validated invoice with the buyer. A lot of clients will ask, why supplier need to share? So trouble, another step. Because they already received the notification, why do I need to share again? Because the notification itself, right, is just notified. It's just like, the e-invoice validated is clear. It will inform the status. And in the buyer's email, right, the notification email, it will let you press the button request for rejection, and that's only. So that's why the supplier is still obliged to share the e-invoice in the visual presentation, let's say in PDF file, to the buyer.
So I see this working very easily for big companies, like I'm buying stock to sell, and I have my own POS systems and all that built in, and I don't need immediate confirmation, right? But what about from B2C level? If I'm a cashier, that extra 22 seconds to validate.
2 seconds.
2 seconds. 2 seconds to validate.
Yeah.
But then I have to share. Then I have to share with immediately. That feels like extra step.
If let's say I'm just standing in front of the counter and I just request the e-invoice from them, right? If let's say the system allows them to share directly to the buyers, then it's quite fast, just 2 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah. If another method is that if let's say the POS system itself cannot like let you request for the e-invoice, maybe for those like supermarket, they have another portal for you to insert some detail and request for the.
Do you know any of the supermarkets that are already trialing the system? Because I've never seen it.
They haven't launched yet.
Okay. So I guess we're going to have to see how supermarkets and all these decide how to do the system.
Yeah. Okay. Especially for those toll. Yeah, toll, they have to cater this.
Sorry. One last question. This system sounds very complicated to implement because, for one, it's electronic and we all know it. There's going to be a lot of teething issues and all that. So why are we going through the trouble of implementing an e-invoicing system?
No choice. The government, their first objective, their first goal is to deter the shadow economy. Shadow economy could include like smuggling activity, other criminal activity, and all those are informal sector, such as the self-employed individual, like those freelancers, and all those gig economy workers, like those who drive Grab. Yeah, most of them they are not declared their income. Yeah, like another thing is that like roadside worker, some of most of them they don't declare income. So that's why government want to cater this kind of shadow economy and turn them into a formal economy. So according to the data that's released by the government last year, actually shows that the size of the shadow economies has been reduced to 21% of the country's GDP. So what does it mean by the 21% of the country GDPs, right? It means the government is annual tax losses, the annual tax leakage of 70 billion. Yeah, that's a lot. So that's why they believe by introducing this e-invoice, the size of the shadow economy could be further reduced. Just now I mentioned the 21% of the country GDP, right? The shadow economy portion is actually reduced to 21%, right? That is due to implementation of GST. And the first step, right? Then now the second step is they want to implement the e-invoice to further reduce the shadow economy. Yeah.
So you mean SST, right?
GST last time.
Last time.
Last time GST in I think 2015.
But GST has been normalized to 0% at the moment, right?
Now it's 0%, but previously due to that effort, it reduced 10%.
Okay.
Yeah,
so that alone reduced the leakage by 10%.
Yes.
And they're expecting that this exercise now will reduce it further.
Yeah.
Okay. That's quite big.
They also want to improve the efficiency of the tax administration between the government department. And also they want to enhance the tax compliance among the taxpayers. Yeah. But of course from the taxpayer side, that is good for country. In the future, you might foresee this e-invoice could actually reduce the human's error and also reduce the human mistake. Because when the supplier issue e-invoice, right, actually the information will be flow automatically to the buyer because all their system is actually integrated with the IRB My Invoice system. Yeah, so this is the benefit in the long run for taxpayer.
I see. So are there any resources from IRB for people to read up, to understand? Because I believe the information on their current website is very bare bones. Are they running workshops, or are there tax experts like you that people can go to ask these questions?
Actually, done a lot of seminars for associations, especially the Perdagangan Association, if not mistaken. If your company wants them to explain what is e-invoice to you and what is the e-invoice treatment for different kind of transaction, right? As a company, you can invite them. You can invite them into your company and ask them to train your staff.
What about freelancers, or maybe the e-hailing drivers?
E-hailing drivers.
Is there anyone out to train them?
IRB also announced upcoming few months, right? They will provide more and more seminars to those taxpayers. But if you don't have any option, can join YYC e-Invoice. E-Invoice, we have workshop for public, we have 2 days workshop, or even you can join our 1.5 hour e-Invoice workshop as well. It's quite simplified one. Yeah.
So this is in person or online?
1.5 hour is in the public for physical.
Okay.
Yeah, if for 2 days workshop is also physical.
And how does one sign up for these workshops?
You can reach out to us via our YYC Advisor Facebook.
Okay. We will put the link in the description on this podcast. So if anyone's interested, maybe they can sign up and look out for you people.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe just last question is, this sounds like it's going to be you need to be a little bit tech savvy to understand what's going on. Well, people who are not very familiar with technology, do you foresee problems with them grasping e-invoicing?
IRB already announced that they will launch a My Invoice mobile apps for all taxpayers. So as long as you have a smartphone, you can issue your e-invoice anytime, as long as you can connect with the internet. Then another good news is that because all my clients feel very troubled, they want to request a lot of buyer details to issue e-invoice, right? But in the future, IRB says they would put the taxpayer information embedded in the QR code. So in the future, you can just bring your QR code along. Then when you buy something, you just show the QR code to scan. Then that's all. So that's a second digital solution provided by IRB. The third digital solution is that IRB will also provide a digital apps, also free for all taxpayers. If you want to use, then can use it.
IRB is literally building the POS system for you. And
point of sale system.
So you just get your tablet or something, and the system is ready to use for free.
For free.
That's actually very impressive.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised. But you did bring up an interesting point when you were explaining that is, as long as you have an internet connection, what if your internet is down?
A lot of my clients ask me this question. Actually, IRB didn't enforce you when do you need to issue invoice, in what within what period you need to issue invoice, unless certain transaction. Later I will go more in depth if you want. They say as long as you are reconnect with the internet, then you shall issue the e-invoice.
As long as you're connected. So it doesn't have to be immediate, it can be a bit later.
No, yeah.
I see, okay. If that's the case, that works if for, say, B2B, but again, for B2C, like in the supermarket, you can't ask the customer to validate at that point.
Oh, actually, customer no need to validate one.
No need to validate?
No need to validate. If we go back to the e-invoice flow, just now I stopped at, I think, the supplier need to share the e-invoice with the buyer, right?
Yep.
After the invoice is validated, then buyer can just check whether it's correct or not. Then if that's okay, then they don't need to actually do anything. They can just do nothing. Then after the 72 hours, the e-invoice will be deemed accepted.
Okay.
If let's say there's something wrong on the e-invoice, they can request for rejection.
Okay.
But it is only request for rejection.
Okay.
So it's not unilateral, like buyer can just directly reject the invoice, cannot. Buyer can just request for rejection. Yeah. Then once they request for rejection, a notification will send through IRB system and notify the supplier. Then the supplier will check what are the problem with the invoice. And if let's say the supplier agreed with the request, then they can just proceed to the cancellation. Straight away cancel. Cannot amend anything. The invoice once you issue cannot amend anything. Just cancel and reissue another one. So within how many hours the buyers need to request for rejection is within 72 hours from the time of validation. That means at the step 2, right? Once the IRB validate the invoice for you, the 72 hours is start counting. So all need to be done in 72 hours, including the cancellation. Yeah, if let's say the supplier disagreed with the cancel, they cannot do nothing. Yeah, then after 72 hours, the invoice will also deem accepted and stored into the IRB database.
I see, okay.
So let's say after 72 hours, then only either the buyer side or the supplier side found out something wrong on the e-invoice. What can they do is they need to adjust the master e-invoice, the previous issue invoice, by using CN, credit note, or debit note, or refund note.
I see. Thank you, Fong Ying, for that comprehensive look at e-invoicing from IRB. To be honest, it seems that these solutions are reasonably well thought out. They seem to have answers for a lot of problems that may crop up. But it's digital, so someone will find a way to mess up, right? So if anyone wants to reach out to YYC, how can they find you guys?
We have our YYC Advisors Facebook, our official Facebook.
Okay, so that's the best way to look for you.
Yeah, that's the best way for you to look for us.
Okay.
Yeah. For the e-invoice purposes, like if you need audit service, we also have. Tax service, we also have. Accounting, payroll service, we also provide all those service. And if you want any training, we have also our own business school. Like now, every week I've done a lot of invoice workshop, especially the customized one.
Thank you so much, Fong Ying.
Thank you, Farhan, for the invitation.
And thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for more from Wealth, Wisdom, and Whatever.